Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Soft Spoken Wednesday in the Mystery Theory channel. Today I'm going to talk about O.J. Simpson. This case was pretty popular back in 1994 here in the US. If you are from here, or if you were living here at the time, you know how big and quote-unquote popular this case was back then. And I think it still is. It's still referred to, especially in the true crime community. It's kind of a turning point or a reference on how, for some people, he got away with it. I am not here to convince you that he got away with it, but this is part of the series of people that quote-unquote got away with it, or criminals that got away with it. I shared part 1 of this series in my Patreon page. If you're part of it and you missed it, please go check it out. Part 2, it was last Friday, I believe, where I share with you guys the guy that killed his wife while sleepwalking, and he was acquitted. We had a little talk about how the sleepwalking part, and for me, how it was kind of interesting to cover since I do sleepwalk, so every once in a while. And so check that out if you're interested. But this is the 3rd installment of the series. This case, I was going to do an entire in-depth video about it, but I realized that after all the research, after all the evidence, that was the evidence that was presented in the court at the time. There's nothing earth-shattering that was discovered after the fact. And I think that at the end, even if I did a very long video giving you the details, it was going to end up being something that you would have to decide for yourself if you thought that he was guilty or innocent. Really. There was nothing crazy about it, and just the fact that the jury knew all this information from the beginning and during the trial, it makes it a little bit, let's call it interesting, okay? Again, I am not here to convince you that he is guilty, and if you believe that he is an innocent man, we're just gonna have to agree to disagree. It's fine. No hard feelings. We don't have to think the same way. Now, let's do a little refreshment of the story so we can get to the part where people believe that O.J. Simpson, or why he got away with it. On June 13th, 1994, just after midnight, somebody walking by finds the bodies of 2 victims in LA. They were both stabbed to death, and the person that was walking by immediately called the police. When the police got there, they immediately identified the bodies, and they were the bodies of Ronald Goldman, which was a waiter, and Nicole Brown, O.J. Simpson's ex-wife. O.J. Simpson, pretty quickly, is questioned, or is somebody, a person of interest. But he quickly escalates from being somebody, a person of interest, to a suspect. Now, that is because of some incriminating evidence that they found. Number 1, the victim's blood in his car. Well, that's kind of, that should do it, right? Well, there's more. There's blood inside and outside of his home. Same kind of blood, the victim's. There is blood in his clothing. And when they were asking him, hey, OJ, what were you doing around this time? He had no alibi. So, four very major things that put him in the spot immediately. Because of all this, they quickly got the arrest warrant for OJ. And he decides that he's gonna play, this trick on the police. And he escapes, actually, in his white Ford Bronco. Now, he not only escapes, but he has $9,000 cash on him, his passport, and a fake beard. That's not looking quite good for you, I think. He was chased for 90 minutes, and this was broadcast to 95 million viewers. He finally surrenders, of course, and he is taken into custody. The trial took some time, but when it started, the prosecution had more than enough evidence to convict him. But his lawyer created a quote-unquote sense of doubt. That was his strategy. Now, just so you know, he had a team of lawyers. I mean, when you have money, you can afford to do that. These people, sometimes I wonder if they have, the pact with the devil or what they do, because I've heard the most outrageous defense in court from some lawyers that gain the freedom of their clients. And like, how did they find that loophole? It's like almost like unheard of. And these people, they're so good at what they do that they can find the tiniest loophole. They can be master manipulators, and they can try to appeal to a certain audience. And I feel like that's what he did. Now, he did have 4 things that he based his allegations on. Like, he claimed, this wasn't proved, but he claimed that the DNA evidence was inconclusive, or it wasn't. So I'm not sure what he referred to or what part could have been inconclusive. Maybe there was enough evidence, but then there was extra evidence that was inconclusive, and maybe he played that card. I am not sure. He also said that the blood samples were mishandled. Maybe that's why, it was inconclusive. Part of them were inconclusive. Again, they did have good samples with conclusive evidence that it was his DNA. So he could have been playing, the other evidence card. Now, and he also brought a couple of things based on that. Like, what if he was framed by a white police officer? And what if he is a victim of a racist police force? There was something that was said back then that he based all this on. And there was one of the officers that made some racist comments. And he kind of played the card of maybe he was accused because he was black. Another interesting fact is that the jury majority was black, and that the attorneys or the lawyers knew. They knew how to play. They know, regardless of, the ethnicity, or regardless of, if they're female, male, whatever they are, they know how to manipulate the jury to believe what they're trying to sell to them. In this case, this was a black male accused of killing a white female. And that started the conversation in the courtroom. But it became something much bigger than that. This started a nationwide debate on racism. I mean, this was a trial that it was over 252 days. And they played with the idea, the lawyers did, played with the idea that he was framed. That all that evidence that they had, it was to send him to jail, even though probably a white officer committed the crime. It didn't look good that he ran away from the police. It didn't look good that he was wearing a fake beard. It didn't look good that he had $9,000 cash with him and his passport. But the lawyers wanted people to believe that he was scared because he realized that the police was framing him for the murder of his ex-wife. Now, let's explore for a second that idea. I wonder why somebody would want to frame him. Did they explore an idea of him having some kind of trouble with a police officer or with a certain part of the police force? Could have been. But there wasn't like, okay, this guy that used to be friends with OJ, now he works for the LA police and he probably wanted to kill his ex-wife and frame him for it because he was no, there wasn't a story like that. The idea was thrown out there that this was based on racism and that it was so broad that really, I mean, it shouldn't have had the impact that it had for OJ, because we know that if you are a quote-unquote normal person walking down the street, you more than likely will encounter some kind of a douche out there that would be a racist or treat you differently because of the color of your skin. That's sadly the world that we live in, or the time that we're living in here in the US. But really, I mean, he was framed because it just didn't make sense. A lot of people were like, okay, why would they throw that out there? It doesn't add up. It doesn't point to anybody in particular that would want to kill his ex-wife and that would want to frame him. There wasn't enough probable cause. This was an idea that was thrown in court, and that it worked, because after 252 days of trial, the verdict was being broadcasted live to 150 million viewers. 150 million viewers that had different opinions. Some of them believed that this guy was just throwing a whole lot of baloney out there and that it caught somewhere. And there were the other people that believe, oh no, he's a poor innocent man that he's being framed. As you probably know, he was declared not guilty. Now, that was back in 94. In 97, he was sued, but this was a civil court, okay? Why in a civil court? Because of the principle of double jeopardy. Once you've been acquitted of something, you can't be retried for that same thing, which it kind of leaves us with the idea that there's no margin of error. Okay, if you've been acquitted, then it was beyond, they had more than enough evidence to believe that you are an innocent man. But are we perfect? I mean, I get it. I mean, you don't want that thing to linger over your head for the rest of your life. But kind of it's an interesting concept, that of the double jeopardy thing. Now, because of that civil court, the trial, the thing that he was sued for was basically whether he was found liable, because they can't find him guilty, but they found him liable. And they order to pay the victim families $33.5 million for wrongful death. So he was acquitted of the same thing, but then he was held accountable for it later on. So just, I mean, I don't know if you knew this. Some people do know, but I thought I'd mention it. He had a team of lawyers, as I mentioned before, and one of them was Kim Kardashian's father, Robert. And in one of the interviews that were made years after the trial, time after the trial, I don't really remember when it was done, but he said that he had doubts about OJ's innocence. Let me make that clear. Sometimes we like to believe that lawyers and, they're paid to find or justice, or they're part of the justice system, but you're paid to defend somebody, basically. And some of the best lawyers say that they need to know if the person is guilty or not from the beginning, so they can work around a strategy, which means that their job is not really being on the just side of things. A defense lawyer must defend his client regardless of what he thinks. That means for some of them, they do not take the case to begin with. And for some other ones, it means that they need to find a loophole. They need to find something to make their client look innocent, even though they know they did it. How can they sleep at night? I have no idea. I am not going to sit here and judge people for what they do for work, but I could never do that. Not for the entire money of the world. Be like, hey, here, that's all for you. I don't think I could do it because, hey, what? Are you releasing a murderer just because you're a smart lawyer, or you found that loophole that really set them free? Is it worth it? Maybe for them, but not for me. It is interesting to believe that lawyers must be just, the part of the justice system. Yeah, they work in the justice system, but especially this kind of case where it's very public, where it's very out there, where it's somebody with lots of money that they won't have any problems paying you more to defend them. That's what happens. Now, I'm not saying that every single person, or every single case, I should say, when they're acquitted, it's they're wrongfully acquitted. No, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that when you have more than enough evidence to convict you, you should be convicted. No, there are exceptions. And again, I find that this is one of them, but on the opposite side. They had more than enough evidence, but enough doubt was thrown at the jury at the time and at the entire community, the entire country, to generate doubt and to explore the possibility of being an innocent man that was wrongfully accused for racial reasons. Now, if you were sitting right here with me and you ask me, what do you think? Almost like the Rorschach test. What do you see? Well, I'm just going to share my views, my point of view. And of course, this is only opinion, and opinions are not facts. So please don't be offended by them. But I think that if he was a white man accused of doing this, I think the lawyer wouldn't have been successful as he was, throwing the idea of racism or trying to find a loophole around that. I believe that if OJ was a white male, they probably would have had to find something different to throw that idea out there and to defend him. And maybe they would have found something, you never know. But I think because of the crisis that we're living in today, and even back then, the idea of people not being respectful of our differences and how we look on the outside, which is absolutely ridiculous, that kind of keeps us occupied thinking about stuff that it really shouldn't matter. You're either a murderer or you're not, no matter how white, black, Asian, brown, whatever. We all have a different looks, and I find it a little bit dumb to judge because of people's differences. That's what I think. Could have been that he was framed? Yeah, 100%. And if you believe that he was framed, I understand. But if you ask me what I think, I don't think so. I think he had a very good team of lawyers, and he had more than enough money to find a loophole and to get away with it. That is my humble opinion. And so, with the distracting idea of racism, a lot of people have different opinions on this, because sometimes they believe that if you believe that OJ was guilty, then you're probably a racist, or you're probably, and believe me, no, not in this case. I just truly believe that the entertainment that the circus that they created, the lawyers created around this case, was what entertained the people enough to get their heads out of the evidence. That was hardcore, and that was more than enough. And that he looked more than enough guilty. I mean, the guy was running away from the police for 90 minutes. I think a lot of people in LA, famous people, celebrities, they think that they can get away with pretty much anything. And not every single one, because you'd have to have some kind of a narcissistic personality to believe that you are better than everyone else, and that you are so much better that nobody would mess with you. But I think it's part of it, don't you think? The celebrities, how some of them end up committing suicide, and that kind of thing that really is going on. You look at Robin Williams. You see a funny guy, a charming guy, a successful guy, had money, had everything he would want, and he ended up not being happy and committing suicide. You have a full spectrum of things. Narcissistic people that think that they can get away with it. People that are so desperate and so depressed and so sad and so anxious that they end up ending their lives. It's just part of the world that we live in. But some people more than others believe they are above the law. And sadly, in some cases, if you have the money, you're more than likely to find that loophole that is not 100% right and it's not 100% wrong, but it's enough doubt for the jury to believe that there is not enough evidence to convict you. Again, I hope I didn't hurt anybody's feelings by sharing my opinion. We can always agree to disagree, and I will always respect your opinions, and you're more than welcome to leave them down below if you want to share your thoughts on this case. I hope that you are enjoying this series, and thank you so much for being there. I appreciate you taking the time to come join me every Wednesday for Soft Spoken Wednesday. I'll have lots of links in the description box down below, like cases that I covered recently, some series like the Aaron Hernandez story that talks about how celebrities pay lawyers to get away with things, and they will all be linked down below, along with my Patreon in case you want to check out that page. See you guys back here on Friday with a whispered case. Bye, guys.